Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to our next Mills Team webinar. I am here with Christine and Katie and Sue and Sarah. Hopefully by now you know who all of us are. I'm Lauren, and Mike from our team is also MIA today, but I'm really excited because we're once again talking about pre-construction condos. And for anybody who hasn't already watched it, you can go back and look at one that we did in the summer with Vice President of Royal LePage Signature, Jeff Slightum, who's an expert on pre-construction condos and kind of gives you a good overview of the process and the differences between resale and pre-construction. And so we thought today we'd kind of talk about that a little bit again, but also talk about the incentives that are being offered by the developers, which is kind of a really interesting time right now, right? Because compared to a year ago when it was a very competitive pre-construction market and people were kind of climbing over each other to just get any suite. Yeah. Now the tables have turned and the developers are crawling to us, and they're kind of giving away a lot of exciting incentives to make these purchases happen. So we're seeing some really neat things, and I thought we'd kind of talk about what we're seeing out there. And if anybody has any further questions afterwards, you can always reach out to us. So just to get us started, I would say that one of the big differences with a pre-construction purchase compared to a resale is the extended deposit structure, right? So unlike buying something today that you're going to close in 60 days on and you're going to need 20% in 60 days, with pre-construction, you have some time. And typically, you would probably need about 10% kind of in that first year, give or take, and another 5% a year later, and probably another 5% when you actually take possession of the condo, so maybe 4 years later. But what we're seeing now is that the developers are really extending even further that 20% total that you need. So, we've heard of, just dragging it out a little bit, but even some even longer extensions.
Yeah. The craziest one I think we saw was only 5% until occupancy. You're only putting down 5%. So that gives you a lot of time to save up the rest of the 15.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the time it takes to build.
4.5 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is incredible, right?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting one. And just having a bit more time, even if it's not 5% in 4 years, but 10% being stretched out or whatever it is. So that's nice for sure. And I think increases the appeal of a pre-construction purchase.
One of the things we often hear about in pre-construction is comparing the prices in those projects to what we're seeing in resale. So for example, condo downtown, if we're seeing at about 1,100 a square foot now, a similar type of project in that area is now selling around 1,400 a square foot. Yeah. So that's about 5%.
In the pre-construction.
In pre-construction, yeah. So that's about 5% for 5 years, which is actually historically lower than what we've seen the market do. So even though you are sort of buying into future values now, in general, we've seen that it's done much better than that. Sure. So you're locking that in and you're getting that extra time to save up and make your decisions.
And you have the use of that other money during that period too, which is great. So if that's in something that's appreciating as well, you're sort of a double bang for your money.
Yeah. Yeah,
totally.
absolutely.
I think, we've been having all these discussions about just, we know the growth in Toronto with immigration alone, like with the massive immigration numbers we're talking. With these projects coming 5 years from now, and if you're an investor and you're going to rent this out, no question, you're going to have a big audience. We already do. We're undersupplied even for rentals, right? So 5 years out, I'm still absolutely convinced we will still need a lot more rentals. So from that standpoint, it's exciting too.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things we see with pre-construction relative as a comparison to resale is the closing costs, the extra money that you're going to need on that eventual possession, which is in the future, but you need more cash, right, to close these pre-construction deals. There's a few extra things that are typically written into the contract that are over and above the purchase price. The major ones are land levies and development charges that the city charges a developer, and then they just pass those on to the buyer. There's also, a few smaller things, but also add up to, lots of incidentals add up to a bigger price. So I would say usually it could be anywhere between 3 to 5% of the purchase price. In addition, are these, costs that you would incur.
And typically you need that in cash on closing.
Right, so it can't be added to your mortgage or anything. Yeah. You are going to need an extra sort of pile of cash for closing. So
the other thing that's so different from resale though too, and we've touched on this before, and you may have, if you've watched one of our videos, but I love the idea too for pre-construction. There's a conditional period that you can have the lawyer review all the legal docs. Yeah. So it's really like a very different environment than buying
that 10-day cooling off period. I think when it was such a high pressure environment and people felt like they had to line up and we're going to buy it or miss it. So it's kind of nice that people can go away, have a lawyer review the documents and just make a really good solid decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on those development fees, so
I mean they're big, right? Yeah. And the development fees are to the infrastructure. The builder has to pay that up front to the city, right? So the sewage lines, the roads in, all that is true costs, and they pass those over to the buyers. What a lot of uninformed buyers don't know is that those can be typically I think in the $15,000 to $25,000 range potentially, depending on the size of the suite they're buying. But what's really pretty exciting, I know you guys have some examples, and I know Mike, who's not with us today, had some too, but where we're seeing the builders saying zero cost, zero development charges. They'll cover them.
They'll cover it.
Or a much lower value, like maybe $5,000 to $10,000 max capped.
Yeah.
And it's so key, like what you're saying, Lauren, is I really feel it's so important to have, a good realtor, with our clients that, can make sure that, you're crossing off all those T's and dotting the I's around things like that. We don't want our clients to have to pay those fees and not have at least a cap, but there's some really fantastic incentives right now. And that's just one good example.
That's a great one. And the thing with the cap, that even in the hottest of pre-construction markets, you absolutely want to have that cap on those purchase, and that's why you do need somebody who can kind of guide you through it, because those go up every year with the city. And the way the contract is written is they go up and you're going to pay it.
And the developer doesn't even have control over it.
No, that's a city fee, right? So you want to make sure that at some level those are capped anyway, and then to see that they're at $0 right now, I mean, clearly it could be a $20,000 savings.
Absolutely.
Right out of your pocket.
Right. Because, you may have said it just now, but just so people are clear, is that if you didn't have the cap, you could all of a sudden have a much bigger deal cost on closing than you even thought. So, like you said, we've always suggested you have to have a cap. At least it's even a lesser cap and or none, which is amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there's other things too that are different between resale and new construction. But one of the things, because it is such a long period of time, and if you're buying a house now and you're closing in 60 days, your situation is probably not going to change that much in 60 days. But sometimes when you buy new construction and it's not going to be done for 3 or 5 years, think how much your life can change in that period. So what you think you're legitimately going to move into or you're going to rent out, let's say you get transferred and now you're in Vancouver and it doesn't make sense to be living in Toronto, or you bought it as you bought it as a single person and now you've got a partner and you've got a baby on the way, and that one bedroom condo might just not be enough space anymore. So one of the things that we always suggest to people to try to get approval for an assignment clause. So basically the ability to sell your position in the deal to another buyer before closing. And, I think sometimes the developers used to charge, $5,000 for the right to have that assignment clause, but that may be one of those things that, we're seeing now the developer will
make that
zero so that you've got that guarantee that if your life is in a different situation in 3 to 5 years, you can sell it. And sometimes, historically people could make big profits in that period of time, kind of almost flipping their agreement of purchase and sale before it closes. If somebody, right now, there probably would be some situations where if somebody was in dire need to get out of their deal, they might, a new buyer might even get, pick up a good deal and pay less than what the buyer originally. But those are probably fewer and far between. But usually somebody would kind of get out in their original position, or hopefully make a little bit of money, or lose a little bit of money. But it's nice to know you can get out is the
great
point.
Safety net.
Yeah,
it really is,
really
right?
That's
a great safety
for sure.
options.
Yeah, you need to have that.
And something else too we're seeing that is being written in is the ability to lease the property
out to a tenant during what they call the occupancy period. So that time between when people are able to start moving into the building until the building's complete. So usually they start moving in on the lower floors and they're still working upstairs, and then people move in floor by floor. And traditionally, unless it was written into the agreement, you couldn't lease it out to a different party during that time. And that time could be 4 months, it could be a year, it could be a year and a half. So if you're an investor particularly, your suite would just be vacant as opposed to being able to lease it out to a tenant at that time. So I think traditionally people, if they even had that clause accepted, it would be paid. And now the builders are really just including it, which is great. So,
and to take that even one step further is that as that buyer, you're going to be paying occupancy fees to the developer during that period. You know, once you can move in and they actually are able to register it with the city, to your point, it could be 4 months, it could be a year. You know, you're paying what's essentially rent. It's the balance of the purchase price less your deposit plus, you know, some allocation for property tax and maintenance fees. And if you can't rent it out during that time, you're just out of pocket. You know,
because it doesn't go toward your mortgage ever. Like it's just pure.
No, it's basically rent, right?
Again, I think another reason why it's important to have us involved or realtor or whatever, for those that aren't maybe our clients now would like to be, is that I just had a call from one of our clients who had a good friend that had bought pre-construction, not with us, and our client was asking me whether that's even legitimate. She thought the builder was taking advantage of her friend, that they were paying the occupancy fee. She said, well, do you know she has to pay basically like rent? And I said, yes, this is an absolute, like it's always been that way. And you know, the things that people just, you know, there's so much going on, right, when you're buying any kind of, you know, residential real estate, but that's another whole other area. And there's just so many areas to, like, even just what we've just talked about for the consumer to grasp. So
no, it's true.
But that's an amazing incentive to be able to definitely have someone renting during occupancy.
Have you guys seen any really great incentives
There is some really, so those are kind of like the main components, right? But we're seeing some actually kind of over the top, really, really exciting things that are being thrown around.
Yeah, I know parking and locker are a big one. I mean, the parking can range dramatically. It can be $70,000, it can be $150,000. So in a lot of projects, we're seeing it either reduce dramatically or it's free. And same goes for locker. It's about 10 to 15,000, I would say, on average. That's usually how much it costs you to add a locker. And those are coming down, or they're free as well.
And you think on resale how amazing it is to have those features.
Oh, yeah.
How many people buy without a locker, and then, you know, it's like, from the practical living there without a versus selling it. So.
The other one is,
the Mortgage Buster. Have you heard this one?
Yes.
Where they're actually providing, one example is $1,000 a month directly into the buyer's bank account to offset, you know, interest rates or whatever for a year. So $12,000 a year handed back to you, or they're giving it to you on closing or on registration. Like that was like on top of all the various other incentives. It's incredible.
And
the developers aren't just doing one. It's usually a combination of all of these things.
If you are an investor and you're buying one, you know, one of the things that we've talked about before in some of our other webinars is maybe about not necessarily being cash flow neutral on these purchases, and the rent that you collect not covering 100% of your costs, mortgage, maintenance fees, property taxes. But what's really cool is the most recent incentive that I saw was if you're an investor and you rent out your suite, the developer is actually going to top up your rent up to $2,500 every month for a 1-bedroom, or for a 2-bedroom, $3,000 a month for 2 years to basically make you cash flow neutral as an incredible incentive.
So for a 1-bedroom, that's $60,000.
Yeah. So you can almost look at, you know, taking whatever that purchase price is, deducting the $60,000, and then comparing that to the price per square foot that you would have been paying. It makes it a lot more palatable, I think, than these kind of futures like you were talking about.
Yes.
Compared to what you're paying for resale today.
Just a peace of mind, take some of that risk of what the rental rates will be. I mean, traditionally, they just go up, but they're pretty high now. But just to know that you'll have that cash coming in is amazing.
It's absolutely incredible.
I just grabbed one. Michael, who can't be here today, but he had gone to this this site. And just to give you an example of the number of opportunities, first of all, there's a price discount: $10,000 off a 1-bedroom, $15,000 off a 2-bedroom, $20,000 a 2 or 3 bedroom. The mortgage buster, the $1,000 a month for a year. The right to lease during occupancy, as Katie mentioned. $0 assignment fee. So you were talking about that. The cap development charges are only $4,000 for a 1-bedroom and $6,000 for a 2-bedroom or larger.
Yeah.
And then the extended deposit structure. So $5,000 on signing, and then balance to 2%, only 2% in 30 days, 2% in March, July, November, and then we're talking 2024, 2% a year until occupancy, at 2027, 5%. Like, it's incredible.
So that's
all of
basically
that.
every single one of those.
Yeah.
Yes, every single one of the things that
What
we
about
just
a parking
talked.
locker? They're not
No,
gonna-
parking locker. No, I'm gonna ask them. All right, they should do that. I saw this. Michael had it, and I was like, wow, that's everything we've really
And
talked
it doesn't
about.
mean that they're bad projects. It's just
No.
right now people are sitting on their hands.
Oh,
right?
I should say,
Right.
like, this is every developer across the city. We're seeing
Huge
this
developers.
amazing projects at Bathurst and St. Clair, and
Yes.
down at Yonge and Richmond, and DuPont, like everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's every developer.
And I think just a window of time is the
Right.
interesting part too.
That's
Like I'm sure as they, as we move forward, I imagine these things will all come back to not being included.
Right, because
So-
we're seeing already like the multiple offers in the entry-level condos downtown
Yes,
again and
condos.
stuff. Like we're really seeing
In the resale market.
the resale market really starting to move at the entry level. So it'll only be a matter of time before the new construction.
Another interesting one I saw, so they were offering 1 year free maintenance. This is a project that's built, that you can move into the suite tomorrow, but the developer owns these suites, and they're actually giving you a mortgage. And they're doing a 2-year fixed mortgage at 3.75%, which is definitely better than the fixed rates
Absolutely.
today. And hopefully within 2 years, the regular rates will come down and you can move on to a regular financial product. So that's something you can even move into, but you're buying a brand new pre-construction unit.
And on top of that, they're offering, this one was actually incredible. It was upgrades, it was the parking, the locker, the mortgage,
Yeah.
free maintenance fees for
A year. Yeah.
The
we should be
incentives
buying
were
one.
absolutely just that.
Okay, we'll sit with you after.
Okay,
We need to know which one that is.
No, that's young. It's Young and Rich, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, I want to be young and rich. So there you go. Okay, that would I could be my tagline, young and rich. But don't you? That's what I've been talking to a few of our clients about this now. Is this pre-construction options? I mean, it's always been a great option, but as we said earlier, just you had to like put in your wish list and pray to God you might get one allocation, right?
Yeah.
So now we've talked about there's all these opportunities, but you're buying now, and yes, you're buying with future proposed price per square foot. However, you're doing that, but you're also getting all of these discounts attached to it. And the reality is 5 years from now, interest rates are going to be lower. We'll never see less than 2% again. I don't think. Maybe it'll be years and years. Never say never, but probably not. We don't want to set that expectation. But there's no question, prices will be up because we're basically, flat right now. Prices are going to be up. We talked about the immigration. And the interest rates will be down. So it's sort of like this perfect sort of little opportunity right now. And I think you're right. I mean, I don't know how long this will last, but certainly that's why it's great to talk about it again. I think it's a real opportunity.
Absolutely. Like there's so many different ways the developer can give you a discount versus just reducing the price, which is something that's, easier, a little bit easier to understand. But in the end of the day, you're still getting the same thing. So that's why we can kind of go through it with clients and say, this is probably worth this much and this is probably worth this much. And so you can add it all up and say, this is basically a $160,000 discount versus if you were buying this
a year ago,
a year and a half ago even, right?
Because it makes sense they don't officially want to lower the prices.
Yes.
So these are ways that they can make it happen in a bit of a different way.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
more for the developers financing and all of that. They
Exactly.
can't really do that, but they can do whatever they want with their profits, and that's
Exactly.
kind of where they're.
And they're really facing the buyer's objections. So if people are sitting on their hands right now and they're saying, oh, well, I'll wait and see, then, they're smart to incentivize people to do it now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting times for
it is.
sure, for sure.
Exciting.
So it's always an adventure, and we love chatting about this. So, like I said, if you have any questions at all with any of these components or pre-construction, it's a different entity, but it's one that we're very familiar with, and we'd be happy to talk to you further. So, thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.